Hello, Americans. Grab my hat. Another friend subscribes around the world. Back again, man. Well, today, I'm going to get back after it again. It is, I don't know, man, probably up to about 38 degrees right now. It was, mid-20s when we got up. We checked the forecast. You know how I feel about them. Checked the forecast yesterday, and it was saying, 38, 40 degrees was going to be the low. So, so I listened to them. That was my first mistake. And didn't cover my tomatoes and stuff, so we may be replanting tomatoes. So I didn't cover nothing, man, and it got down. We were up at 4:30, and it was, I think it was 23 degrees or 22 degrees. It just never fails, man. Anyway, today, obviously, I'm getting ready to open this thing back up. Hauled some stuff. I don't know if you can see it, but I got a whole bunch, I got a lot to haul over. But this morning, drinking coffee and getting my morning going, I was listening to YouTube videos or podcasts, whatever you want to call them. And today, man, I was watching a bunch on the folks that are, ending up living in their cars, vans, motels, storage units. Man, a lot of people living in storage units secretly and getting thrown out. So, when I was watching these and stuff, I was thinking, oh man, I had to put one of my videos together and show some of these folks, and I may end up doing that, but it got me to thinking about my own life, and I've been homeless, I don't even know how many times, a couple of times we were homeless, and we didn't consider ourselves homeless, but everybody else did. So, I'm going to find a place. I don't think I'm going to do it out here. It might be windy on that camera right now, too. May end up going and sitting at the desk. It's chilly out here. And just like that, the plans change around here. Happens a lot. So now, it's still cold, man. Now, here in a couple of hours, we're going to head out and go rail hunting for Raina's birthday. So that was just a last minute. Get this dang camera adjusted. Just a last minute thing. So I've opened up my the trailer because I was planning on moving a bunch of this crap over to that, and now we're going to go mushroom hunting, so I've got to go unload my truck, all the wood that I got in my truck, unload it, throw a couple fishing poles in. I don't know how the morels will be. But anyway, man, I started this video, because my mind, which now my mind's kind of wandered, but, talking about, homeless and people, what they're going through and stuff right now, and man, I've been there and done that. So I was thinking on it, and man, a couple of things that I hadn't thought about in years or I'd forgot about. We'll start, man, with the first time. First time I was homeless is, man, I must have been 15, and I was living with my mom or my mother, and I got a mouse in here. I'll shoot that mother. Dang 22 or pellet gun or something. mother. Anyway, so I was living with my mother at the time, and I was working nights, and I don't know what she'd told my grandpa or something like that, but my grandpa came in, and it was morning time or whatever, and I'd worked all night, and I don't really know if he knew what my schedule was or anything, but whatever she'd told him. So he kicked me out my mom's house. So I went down and lived on the Boise River. That was only for probably a week or something like that. But then the next time that I was homeless, so in that time, you know, from 15 to 16 years old, which, man, back then the years seemed to go on a lot longer than they do anymore. But I think it was 16 to 17, you know, and I went to live with my father on that hippie commune, Oregon, White City, Oregon. And he went off and chased his girlfriend at the time, and went off chasing her, took my brother and sister, and went and chased her over to Washington, you know, and sold the place up there and everything. And man, I was, you know, I ain't going nowhere. And so I ended up homeless. Man, that time I was homeless for probably a year. And man, I remember, you know, when he left, it must have been the end of the summertime, you know, so it wasn't too bad, but I had a 1968 Chevy pickup truck, 3 on the tree. Man, it was awesome. And that's all I had, man. So I had stuff in the back of it, you know, and ended up losing everything I owned. I was pretty much lost on the mountain. And I remember one time I was going through Jacksonville, Oregon, you know, which is just a little podink town. And I don't know what time it was. Dark, man. It was cold. It was wintertime. I was homeless. You know, which I didn't really think about it being homeless. I was surviving is what I was doing. At that time, man, it was so cold, man. It was in the wintertime, and it was so cold, and I had no heater in my pickup truck. The heater didn't work. The heater core was out. And it was so cold for I don't know how many, at least a week, maybe 2 weeks. I went, and the only thing that I had besides that pickup truck was a post office box in White City. And it was so cold that I was going in by the post office box, and I'd lay down by it, you know, because you walked in, you were kind of hid. Man, I'd lay down and go to sleep, and as soon as I'd hear somebody, because it's open 24 hours, and when I'd hear somebody coming in, I'd jump up with my key like I was getting in my post office box, man, and I did that, man, night after night just to keep warm, because it was cold. But anyway, man, so I was over in Jacksonville, Oregon, and it was late, you know, late at night, and I had the window cracked because the defrost, nothing to worry, man, there was no heater whatsoever, and I had the window cracked, you know, why, I don't know, trying to thaw out the window, looking out the window, I don't know what I was doing. You know, I was 16 or 17 years old, man, and I ended up getting pulled over. And remember the cop coming up, you know, and which he was telling me, man, that they watch for people with their windows down, frickin', because that's a sign of a drunk driver. So he pulled me over because my window was down. And then the other thing that they do, if the drunk driver is behind them that they're suspecting, they'll kind of go over, they'll swerve over a little bit. And if the frickin' drunk driver follows them, then they're usually pretty drunk. So that was just some tricks after we started talking. Because anyway, so he came up to my window, man, and, you know, obviously I wasn't drunk. And came up there and was talking to me and gets my license and all that stuff, man. I'm just shiver, man, because dude, it was so cold. And he's all, what are you shaking for? And I'm all, man, I'm cold, man. The heater don't work in this truck. He's all, come over here and get my car, man. I sat in the front seat, man, not the back seat. You know, that's always a good sign. Sat in the front seat and just talking to him stuff, and you know, he's questioned me, you know, trying to get the lowdown, man. Probably wanted to put me in jail. But he's also, where do you live? And I was all, well, right now, nowhere. Camp out and sleep in my truck. You know, because I used to go set camps up down the river and stuff when it wasn't freezing. I mean, it was cold, man. It was like December, January cold. And he's also, you're a transient. And I'm all, what is that? I didn't even know what a transient was. And, I guess I am. Too crazy. Anyway, man, he freaking ended up talking to me, man, wished me luck, and away I went, man. I don't know what the heck I was doing. That was just something that I was, watching or listening to these people talk about homelessness, man, and that for some reason came back to me. I hadn't thought about that or whatever in a bazillion years. So then, you know, life goes on as it does. And at the time, man, let me tell you, at the time, I was actually working 2 jobs. I was working at Wendy's, and I was also working at a retirement place, you know, where the folks would buy their apartment or what do is quite the scam, man. But they'd pay all this money and buy this deal. Or I was serving food, you know. I'd go out and serve food and stuff to them, you know, because they had a big ballroom or whatever. So I was working 2 jobs, man. 2 jobs I was working, and, you know, still didn't have a place to live. Man, this is back in, like, I don't even know, man, 1987, I guess, 86, 87, somewhere in there. So, anyway, man, life goes on, and you know, me and Miss Kitty found each other again and all that. And when me and Miss Kitty got back together, here we are again, man. It's me and her this time now. Now we're homeless. We ain't got nothing. We are going around and sleeping on people's couch, man, together. That's, man, once we found each other again, we weren't, you know, no way letting go. So we slept on people's couches, camped out, done a lot of camping. You know, and we were both working, man, both working. She was working at Taco Time. She worked at Taco Time at the time. She gave up her bank job and worked at Taco Time. And, where was I? I was probably building, Northwest, building modular buildings. So I'm working again, man, just taking, you know, trying to save up, and I was making like $4.75 an hour, and she's probably making, I don't know, the minimum wage is $3.35, so she probably wasn't making over $4 an hour. Can you believe that, man? But so we did that. So we were homeless, man. We, you know, pinching pennies, man, saved every cent we could, and ended up renting a place down in Garden City, you know, which is right there. It's right in the middle of Boise. But ended up renting. It was a travel trailer, you know, probably 1960s travel trailer that they had set up. It was all skirted and everything, you know, and it had a bedroom. And then you walk through the bedroom, there was the bathroom, into this little kitchenette thing, and then the little front room, man. I don't know. It was probably, I don't know, 35 feet long, maybe. It was just a little thing. So we finally ended up renting that. We were there for quite a while. And then I went from Northwest, quit, and was a mobile home service guy. Traveled around, and You know, the one time I was out traveling or whatever, and Miss Kitty had that place, you know, but she'd go and stay with my mom and stuff like that while I was gone, because I'd go out, they'd tell me I was going to be gone for a week out doing mobile home service work, and then I'd end up being gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. So one time I called, and freaking Kitty was going through something, when man was crying on the phone, and I told her right then, I was all, that's it, I won't, this will be the last trip I made. And that's when we ended up getting married too. When I got back that time, we got married, and then I don't think I ever went back out, you know, I quit, you know, which actually, man, when I was a mobile home service guy, Kitty was picking up the checks. And at the time, I think I was pulling in about $1,000 a week, and I was just out on the road, so wasn't spending it. So she was putting this money away, and ended up getting married. We got married, you know, and that was 36 years ago. 36 years ago, and then from there. So, man, we had, you know, she had, I don't know how much money we had. I mean, to us, it was a gob, man. It was probably, I don't know, $5,000, if that. You know, 2, 3, 4 grand. I don't know how much it was. But from that, we ended up renting a basement apartment, you know, the conversion. And I'm really starting not to go into this homeless thing. Now I'm going off telling my life history. Anyway, so we rented this basement apartment and lived down there. And Miss Kitty, man, she's, you know, she's pretty hot now. I think she's pretty dang hot, always. And back then, like, holy, ooh la la. If I think about it, I'll put a picture in here. Holy smokes. So, but anyway, so we had a rabbit. We had this pet rabbit. And you weren't supposed to have no pets at this place. And there was no way that the landlord, which he lived right there, no way that this landlord could have known we had this rabbit unless he came in our place. And Miss Kitty had noticed that her drawers were, you know, gone through and stuff like that. I think that freaking landlord pervert was going down there and looking at my wife's panties or something. I don't know, weirdo. So we got the hell out of there and rented. Then we found a little house that we lived in, had kids and all that in that house. And then after that house, back to homeless. If we didn't think we were homeless, we had a motorhome. You know, and of course, all this time I'm doing, you know, same thing. Even when I was in the pickup truck in Oregon, I'd still do flea markets. You know, I'd go out and throw some shit out, you know, on a weekend here, not in the winter, though. But they had what was that little town out there? I think it was called Talent. And they had a storage unit place where they had a flea market. I can't remember if it was year round, but used to set up. Anyway, see, I'm telling you, man, I started going about this. This is stuff that it just starts coming to me because I haven't thought about it in so long. So anyway, so me and Miss Kitty, you know, flea markets all the time. And we ended up having our third kid, and I've told this story on here, so we won't go into all that, and ended up moving into the motorhome, which to us, man, we're like, all right, we actually own, you know, because I own the motorhome, own our own home, but, you know, you're still considered homeless, man, or they considered you homeless. So we lived in our motorhome for, I don't know, 6 years or something, until it blew up. And I was renting we called it the shop, but it's just a warehouse, you know, with one big slider door, and wobbled the motorhome into there, and was renting, like I said, this warehouse. So I ended up, you know, I can't remember if I got it towed or what I did. Got the motorhome or hobbled it in there because it was running. I mean, it was bad. Bad thing. Thank goodness it happened close to, you know, close to the area. But anyway, hobbled it in, so then we were still homeless, and had the motorhome out there on the, put it on the side of the shop. So then we started living out of the motorhome in the warehouse. That was a pain in the butt. And at the time, man, when the motorhome blew up, other than paying rent on that warehouse or shop, other than paying rent on that, we were 100% debt free. And then I ended up having to borrow some money. I borrowed, I think, $1,000 from my mom to buy a van so I could still haul my junk. And from there, just got into, and then I had to make her pay her back, So then I was on our way to going back into debt some, as far as I was concerned. And then the years go by, trying to make sure I don't miss any in this homelessness. Man, we've lived in, I don't know if I guess you'd call it homelessness or whatever, because we lived out of that shop, and then I rented the whole shop, and then I broke my foot off, and then we were back living at the shop, and I had a hospital bed inside that same shop, that warehouse. Had a hospital bed in there, all my junk, piled up everywhere. And had a hospital bed in there, and I was in a wheelchair for 6 months, wheeling myself around. And that was pretty homelessness, man. That was pretty rough. But the places we lived is what I was getting at. We've lived, we've been homeless, man, where we had nothing but a tent and people's couches. And then this is just our time together, not counting the times before we got back together or whatever you want to call it. We've pretty much been together for always. I took a 2-year hiatus or something. But, back when when I went to live with my father, because me and Kitty were together, and then I went to live with my father against my better judgment. Anyway, that's a whole different story in itself. But man, we've lived in, had a tent, people's couches, camp trailer, motorhome, warehouse. We had opened up a store and ended up living in the back of the store. And then the kids, by then, they were teenagers, and they were living in camp trailers out behind the store, in the trading post. And then we moved into this grossest, I was supposed to be buying it. It was a scam. That was a bunch of tweakers had lived in this old mobile home. It's actually where I started doing these videos, man, was from the back of it. Man, I had junk everywhere, dude. But tweakers had lived in it. They'd cut holes through the floors and stuff, man. They had it. They'd go down there, and there's little camps where they could be looking out the skirting. There, it was crazy. Anyway, man, I was supposed to be buying that, and the dude was scamming me the whole time. For 2 years, he scammed me. So basically it ended up being rent, but it was supposed to be payments towards buying this place. And, just one of those deals. So anyway, from there, that's pretty much where when we bought the, the creek bottom. And the creek, thank God we bought this place when we did. But the creek bottom, people would consider us homeless, especially when we moved on here, man. There was a pump house. There was power, a pump house, and that was it. That was all that was out here, man. Living in the 1949 Vagabond. I had the 69 Chinook motorhome. And then, I had 2 or 3 camp trailers. I had stuff piled in. But once we got our own land, man, there is no, you ain't homeless then. But I don't even know how I got on all this. And it kind of took a different avenue than I was thinking about talking, man. But I was going to show clips and do a bunch of that with, some of the clips, man. My heart, man, thoughts and prayers to any of y'all that are living living that way and, you know, doing what you got to do to survive. And then I was in there after I was watching those things, and Miss Kitty was kind of listening to them too, and we were talking, and she's all, well, back when you were living out of your truck, and back when we, were jumping couches and living in a tent and stuff like that, you didn't have the internet and all these people. So was there more, was there quite a few people living like that at the time, even, back then? Who knows? You didn't hear about it. And if you're, when you're working at, like Wendy's or whatever, man, none of those people knew I lived in my frickin' truck. I didn't tell people nothing. Crazy times. But anyway, her point was, did we live like, was there more people living like that than you actually knew of? Maybe. It's been going on for a long time, and then, and now you see it and you hear about it on the internet all the time, and the van life, and, van life, and living out of your cars, living in storage units, man. I was watching one this morning of them getting thrown out of storage units, getting busted, because you can't live in a storage unit, not legally. But, hey, you do what you got to do to survive, and I completely understand that. And then the one I was watching this morning, they were, a bunch of them, man, they were living in motels, and it was cheaper to live in a motel than it was to pay rent. Insane, man. So, my advice to you, in these times, I don't know, man, do what you got to do, I guess, man. Thoughts and prayers for all of us in this crazy world. I think now I'm going to go out and unload the truck. So the next one will probably be out there mushroom hunting, maybe a little fishing, a little time in the woods. It sure is windy and cold out there, so we'll see how it goes. Good Lord willing, and them creeks don't rise. We'll be back again tomorrow. See ya.